I think I ruined my career by showing the behind the scenes of my business. And then people were like, how can you have this name? How can you charge what you're charging? This is so ridiculous. And I didn't want to go back on the last day. And I was terrified.
I remember.
And you told me that I have to go out and I have to show them what makes me me. I get a little choked up. Thinking about that conversation, because you said go back and show them what makes you you. And on day 5, what I showed was everybody saw all of the ugly, but what the client sees is a very small percentage of that. Yep. And then what we did was we curated all of the marketing assets, and then people were completely blown away.
Right. And this is the process.
Thank you. Welcome back to the Jasmine Star Show. I could not be more excited. Can you hear it in my throat? Like I kind of feel like there's this like nervous, excited edge because the person sitting across from me is not just a brilliant entrepreneur. He is not just a successful author. He is not just a kind, brilliant, creative human being. He is here today, here to guide us to talk about, more than anything, our inability and lack thereof of playing it safe. He believes that we should never play it safe. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the show, Chase Jarvis.
I could not be happier to be here.
Chase, okay.
Sorry, I just blew the audio guys'
That's,
ears
I
out.
know. They're like...
But that's real. You can't hide that.
So what people really know about my recent entrepreneurial journey looks a certain way. But you and I go back. And so what I want to do is I want to frame this podcast in 3 sections.
Okay.
Because I do believe that sometimes it's easy for speakers, for authors, for thought leaders to come in and present an idea and people are like, okay, cool. But what I want to do, because I have a very unique vantage point, is
you've seen it all.
I've seen it all, man. Like I've seen it all from the back.
And likewise, I've seen your journey. Yeah.
And so I want this conversation to be super real. I want it to get ugly. I want it to be beautiful. I want it to be messy because that's what building our businesses has been. And so breaking this podcast into 3 sections, it's like when we first met, when I started learning your philosophy of not playing it safe in life, then I want to move into business iteration. You and I started building different businesses around the same time and like strengthening the muscle of not playing it safe. And then we're going to get into a conversation about what that looks like for you right now. Like, why are you so passionate about sharing this message at this point in time?
I love it.
Okay, so let's go back.
Everybody loves a good framework.
You know, I mean, you know your girl. I only think in frameworks, brother. Like this is how it is. And it's like you're the super creative. And
our little artsy brains, they go all over the place. But if we can have a couple of like nice little sandboxes to play in. Yeah, I love it. A little structure.
A little structure. So let's go back. And the year is 2010?
Okay.
2000? Okay. And so I get a phone call.
I'm younger then.
Yeah.
I'm better looking.
Aren't we all? No, but you age like fine wine, brother. You age like fine wine.
4 hours of sleep.
Go.
People.
Hey, I know. He also flew in. We're recording in Austin. He flew in from Seattle. His flight was delayed. Didn't get to his hotel till like 2:30 in the morning. And at the time of this recording, it's about 8 in the morning. So he is looking just fresh and clean. Let's go. See, we're not playing it safe. That's what we're not doing today. We are not playing it safe.
I love your framework. I think it's a great, great setup.
And that's what I want to do. I want us just to have a real conversation. I want people to get a front row seat to like the ick and the climb of a good journey.
Great.
So it's 2010.
2010.
More or less. And I get a call from a person by the name, or I get an email from somebody and they said, Chase Jarvis would like to set up a phone call with you. And a quick Google search reveals like who you are. And I'm like, whoa, this guy is legit. What is he doing calling me? And can we explain the story on both sides around that phone conversation?
Sure.
So my phone rings.
First.
Okay, me first.
No,
okay.
Actually, you know what? I'm going first.
Okay, good. Please.
I'm going first. It was 2010, and we had just started what was essentially an experiment in online learning. It's very difficult to go back this far, 15 years ago now, 14 and a half years ago, and think that there was literally online learning was not a thing.
Yes.
I had a podcast at the time. I just started it in 2009, which was essentially one of the first 10 interview podcasts on the internet, which was very strange to even be saying that now because now there's 100 million or something like that.
Back in my day, kids.
Totally, it sounds hilarious. This is the story for today. But the year was 2010, and we had just started essentially an experiment that I had been building a large community in the photography space, and myself and a partner had this idea that the future was going to be about being able to learn from people that you admire and respect from anywhere in the world, and the internet was going to do that. Really,
Can we pause though, like for the gravity of this? Because like you said, it's really hard for people to understand, like 14 years ago, when we just pick up our phone today, we forget that like that didn't exist. Like online education
did not exist.
Did not exist. Specifically, it did not exist in a video or a streaming capacity.
Nope.
And so it's like, you guys, 14 years is nothing, and it's so everything.
Right, it's 1,000 years.
And so when you say it's an experiment, I want to take people back to that.
Sure.
It didn't exist.
We had to create our own payment system, our own video system, our own audio recording, our own streaming files. We literally had to do everything. We essentially, there was one system out there that was built for military to talk to their spouses overseas. So we basically hijacked that and morphed it into something. The way we tested this thing was I had a photo shoot, and we just put cameras up and broadcast to my community, hey, I'm doing an album cover photo shoot. If anyone wants to watch, you can just see how I operate. 25,000 people watched that photo shoot live. And we were like, oh, this is actually a thing. So what if we could build a platform where this was the norm?
Okay, let's pause, because
Sure.
I just don't think that, okay, the storyteller in me, I look at this, and the podcast host in me has done you a disservice, because what you said is, so I did a shoot for a band. And so let's pause for a second. Chase was and is one of the highest regarded photographers, and cover of Newsweek, builder of apps, writer of books, photographer amongst stars and athletes and major campaigns.
Sure.
And so I didn't say that thing. And so we talk about building community.
Sure.
There was like, and this is what I want people to know and believe, is like, there's parts of our story. And when you bring people into that, you build people who are like, I care about the thing you care about. And what you are really good at and very early to see is anytime that you could share information with people, they in turn became devoted, not to you, but devoted to this bigger idea, that community that we can learn together. And so at the time, like you guys, like, let's go back. At the time, there were photographers, there were creators, there were authors. There's all these big name people who lived in silos behind these magic Willy Wonka castles. And what you did is you said, I'm going to turn the castle inside out, and I'm going to share all of this information to all of y'all. And so what you did as an experiment, it cost you money. It cost you team. Sounds like I'm crying. I'm so moved. I'm so moved by the spirit of creativity. Okay, and so that's right. So you already said amen. That's right. And so then when you say, let's have this experiment, I'm going to broadcast me shooting, and it's just, we're going to try this. We're going to do something that's never been done. And 25,000 people watch, and then you're like, ding, something's here. And so I really just wanted to parse that out before we like really put the gas in the story.
Sure. Okay. It's very hard to articulate. And again, I think we don't want to reference back to that too much, but that was, everything that you just said was true. That didn't exist.
Right.
There was no such thing. I mean, hat tip to Gary Vee, but I had a full-time video person following me around starting in 2005. With the goal of telling stories about my journey of becoming a photographer, because when I went to learn, there were no resources.
Right.
There's a bit in the book where I actually went to the library and flipped through card catalogs and checked out books about photography, because there was nowhere else. And when I would try and, introduce myself to other working photographers, that was very secretive.
Yes.
So it sounds like a foreign language when we're saying it now, but that was the norm. And to me, there was an opportunity to help other people learn. And to me, that's actually, I think I can say my photography is world class. I've done, literally hundreds of campaigns for Apple, Nike, Samsung, just massive global campaigns, hundreds of them. And yet I feel like what set me apart as one of the early people in photography and a pioneer was specifically sharing my journey, not just the good stuff either.
Right.
Was sharing my journey on the internet. And so with that as the backdrop.
Yes. Thank you.
Yeah, with that as the backdrop, that's what we sort of leaned into with this experiment. The year before, I had launched a photo app. It was the app of the year on the Apple iTunes platform. This was late 2009. And it was the first app that used photographs as the basis for a social network. And that went to number one. And it was essentially, Instagram is a lift and stamp copy of what was called Best Camera. And there's great footage somewhere on the internet in the Wayback Machine. You can find the Instagram CEO at the time talking about that. And I learned a lot about creating a business in that moment, because when you go from nothing to, the number one in the App Store, there's all kinds of challenges. And that's also well chronicled on the internet. But I felt like I could leverage the experiences from that into this new experiment. And our mantra was to move fast, was to experiment and bring the community along for the ride.
Move fast, experiment, bring the community.
Yeah.
So on the back of your success career,
Sure.
on the back of knowing that sharing information, on the back of broadcasting something as an idea, on
Yep.
the back of building an app, on the back of growth, and on the back
Yeah.
of the peaks and valleys,
Yeah.
you're then like, hey, I have this idea. And when it came to finding who you wanted to bring in initially,
Sure.
how did I come in the mix?
Well, our first class was a commercial photography class, and it had 50,000 people. And it was, I mean, that absolutely blew our expectations out of the water. And a certain percentage of those people, the business model was very simple at the time. It has since morphed. And this is a long journey. The company was actually acquired by a big public company, et cetera. But essentially anyone in the world could watch for free. And if you wanted to be able to watch it again, then you had to pay for it. And it was roughly like $150 or $200 or something, which was totally transformational because you used to have to fly across the country, spend $5,000 for a long weekend with your hero, mentor, et cetera. Our first class had 50,000. Our second class had 100,000. And both those were oriented around more of the commercial photography that I was doing at the time. And I knew that wedding photography was massive and that there were people in that area of the industry who were shining stars. And one in particular, whose name is Jasmine Star, was really interesting to me and my partner at the time because you were doing it differently. And you were bold, fearless, and I think you and I both know that while both of us were bold and fearless out, on camera, we were terrified and
stupid
and curious and terrified and worried and all those things. But it occurred to us that the wedding universe was a big universe and what could make this interesting. And we had this basic framework of if we could take someone that we truly felt was dynamic and leading edge of their craft and put them in an actual wedding, that would entertain and inspire the internet, the photographers around the world who wanted to learn a little bit more about that. So the market was big. The talent was raw and real, and the opportunity had nothing like this had ever been done in the history of the world. So we essentially put those in a blender, and we had a very short list of people. And actually, I knew numbers 2, 3, and 4 on our list, and didn't know you. And so I don't remember how I actually reached out to you, but
I do. Can I take us back?
Yeah, please do.
Okay, so I get the email, and it's from somebody in the team, and they explain who you are, and they asked if we would be able to have a conversation, and I said yes, and they said we would like to have a conversation as soon as possible, and it was a weekend, and I said yeah, we'll have this conversation, and so you call. And I hear a lot of ambient noise in the background, and it sounds like you're outside. And you're like, please forgive me. I'm at a barbecue. You're at a barbecue or you're at a party or something like that.
I remember. Yeah.
And we have this conversation. It's maybe 10 or 15 minutes. And you don't even go into the size of the production of stuff that you've done. You don't go into the background story. You just say, hey, I have this crazy idea, and I want you to be a part of a crazy idea. What if we had a live wedding and you shot it on the internet? And like my whole frame of reality just right there broke. I remember sitting, we had this condo, it was like our first condo ever. I'm sitting, we have like very little furniture in our house, and I'm just like, like alive, like I couldn't even, my mind, I was like, and then on the internet, like I had no frame of reference whatsoever. Yeah. And then I was like, let's do it. I think I gave it like maybe 30 seconds, and I was just like, I don't know who this guy is. He's freaking crazy, and he's my kind of crazy, and all in. Like I didn't think about anything else other than like, let's do it. And you're like, great, I'm gonna have the team, we're gonna draft some contracts, we'll explain more things, and they're like, great, cool, blah, blah, blah. And that was it, dude.
Yeah.
We went all in. Like we literally went on. It was like this arranged marriage. And so what was I, class number 3?
Yes.
I was class number 3.
Yeah.
So.
And I will say that 150,000 people watched that live wedding.
150,000 people. And the crazy thing is, it's hard when we like let's go back to 2010. Like this is like even before Facebook was available to people that were not in college. So the main social platform at the time was Twitter. And when we shot this live wedding and 150,000 people were watching, we were trending on Twitter.
I have great screen caps.
I mean,
Jasmine Star wedding. Barack Obama is right behind you, and Lindsay Lohan is third.
It's like, you're in good company. It's like me, Barack, and Lindsay back in 2010. And so like that whole thing was so transformative. And we're not going to get into the details of that.
Sure.
But what I do want to highlight was, So the format, it was a 5-day course.
Yeah,
5
which was a
days.
lot.
That's a lot. That was a lot. I mean, here we are, we're still like learning the process. And so what happens is on day 1 and 2, I spend time educating what what my process is, how I market, how I build my business. Day 3, we shot a live wedding. It's a Wednesday. We're shooting a wedding on a Wednesday. There's 150 people. It's in Seattle. Of course it's raining. Of course. And so, man alive, there was like this refurbished chocolate factory, and then like the Creative Live team came in and like redid the whole thing. And so it was a real bride, a real groom, everything made. And this is such a rare thing to be broadcast on the internet. Yeah. So I shoot the wedding. It is probably a 14-hour day. Mm-hmm. I'm talking to the camera as I'm shooting. We go back to these little tiny, like, we called it, like, it was supposed to be like a studio, but it was really just a pipe and drape. It was probably like 4 feet by 4 feet. Janie and I are sitting there, and we're like trying to eat, trying to edit, trying to teach. And then the next day, what I did stupidly is I showed all 100,000s of people who are watching this, every photo that I took on that day. So thousands of photos, sure, unedited. Yep. And I'm going through and I'm selecting my photos. And the pain, the vitriol, the comments of you're terrible. Like, what in the world? Like, how did they hire you? Like, you've overshot, you're underexposed, you're out of focus. And as I'm sitting there and I'm teaching this, that night we go back to the hotel, and JD had to take me off that bathroom floor.
I remember.
Because I told you, yeah. I was like, I don't think I can go back. I can't go back. Like, I think I ruined my career by showing the behind the scenes of my business. Mm-hmm. And then people were like, how can you have this name? How can you charge what you're charging? This is so ridiculous. And I didn't want to go back on the last day. And I was terrified.
I remember.
And you told me that I have to go out and I have to show them what makes me me. I get a little choked up thinking about that conversation, because you said go back and show them what makes you you. And on day 5, what I showed was everybody saw all of the ugly, but what the client sees is a very small percentage of that. Yep. And then what we did was we curated all of the marketing assets, and then people were completely blown away.
Right. And this is the process.
Thank you. Let's talk about the process.
This is the dirt. Like, this is what, and it's not, I orient around the creative process, right? This is the process. The first draft is ugly and brutal, and yet it's the most important draft because it goes from 0 to 1, from nothing to something, and then we refine it. And whether you're writing a screenplay or taking a set of photos, directing a video, any of it, it all follows this format. Essentially, you put something out in the world, then you refine it, and it gets better. The same is true for a life, right? We first start out in a relationship, and we ask someone we were crazy about on a date, and it's awkward, and and then it gets better. That is the way the world works, right? We iterate and refine, and the creative process just happens to turn that inside out, and it's very easy to look at it. On a life scale, it's kind of difficult. Right. And what we saw with your photographs was exactly what we wanted the world to see. And to me, there's all sorts of metaphors in here, because you thought that your career was trashed. Yeah. And then 24 hours later, you were a hero, where your name was trending above Barack Obama and Lindsay Lohan. And it was the largest class in the history of the world. And so what's embedded in that message is that all of the best stuff in our lives is on the other side of that moment when you're lying on the floor of the bathroom. That's where the title of the book comes from, Never Play It Safe. And again,
can we say that? Can we pause there? Because that hit deep. All of the best things in our life are on the other side of laying on the bathroom floor.
They are on the other side of our comfort zone, the other side of fear.
Right. It was my bathroom floor. Please, not everybody needs to be on the bathroom floor. Please, we don't want to.
And you don't need to go to Jasmine's house in order to get.
I was like, I'm going to start charging people. Lay on my bathroom floor. It's freaking magical. This is where you want to be.
But I think it's important to establish that this is, all of my personal experiences of, winning and losing. This is the process that you have to go through. I have had one of the longest running interview shows on the internet and talked to thousands of the world's best entrepreneurs, creators. And this is the pattern. This is not, all the research that I put into the book. There aren't examples of that not happening.
Yeah.
And so
give us an equation. So somebody's listening right now.
2 parts horse pucky, 3 parts effort, 1 part smiles and rainbows equals success.
Well, 1 part eat horse pucky.
Yes, exactly. It's not just horse pucky. It's you have to ingest.
No, but really, people are listening, and I'm like, I wanted. So people know on the show that I do not bring people on the show that I do not know personally or have not read the book. And I'm fortunate enough to have done both of those things with you. But I want to hone in the main thing.
Sure.
And the main thing is it sucks.
Yeah.
and you feel exposed and you eat horse pucky, but it's on the other side of that. And so many people stop at the hard.
Yep.
Based on your research, based on everything you've seen, based on like you've iterated many times in your career,
Yep.
and you've facilitated a lot of people. What is it?
It truly is that all of the best stuff in our lives is on the other side of fear, and that the ability to go there is a muscle that's trainable. And the irony is that gets trained out of us. It's very easy to see how creativity gets trained out of our kids. And I personally experienced that. Go back to second grade, Miss Kelly. I made a film the summer between first and second grade. I came into second grade on a high. I was rolling. I had a profitable film. We screened it in David Trolson's basement, made more money than we spent. 8mm film, edited all in camera, sold out the basement, sold candy, sold all the candy. So profitable film, rolled into second grade. I had a comic book. I had a stand-up comedy routine. I had a magic routine. And at some point early in the first half of the year, Miss Kelly shut it all down. And she said, well, first of all, this isn't appropriate for school. This is a business. You can't sell your comic strip, which I would. I would write it up. My mom would make copies of it, and I would distribute it for the exact price of a milk, okay. 6 cents. So you could choose to have my comic strip instead of your milk. Fast forward, Ms. Kelly said, who do you think you are to be doing all this stuff? I think you should stick to sports. You're a better athlete than you are an artist, and none of this is appropriate for school. So just essentially shut me down. And this is what we do to our kids, right? In the most common environment. And we start being trained, just like the creativity is trained out of us, so is our ability or our willingness to push beyond the fear. We start being told what normal is and how we should fit in. And in that moment, I snapped into it. Mm-hmm. Fast forward, I became that person. I was the homecoming royalty, the captain of the football team. I dated a cheerleader. I just gravitated toward the most benign, typical script that anyone could. And it worked. And on the last day of my senior year, I got the typical senior award, which is terrifying to me. That is that is the equivalent of saying you are a cliche. Mm. And I knew it wasn't good. And I realized in that moment that I had to make some changes. But in the same way that all of those things are trained out of us, so is our innate desire and willingness to go beyond the fear part that shows up in us. And it's true, biologically, we are wired. We're social animals, so we're designed to try and fit in, because early on we were part of tribes, and if you can't stand out and fit in at the same time, so the goal was to fit in. And the message on the other side of all that is that in order to have the remarkable human experience that we seek, we have to go beyond that. And to me, this is a muscle. This is the book that I wrote talks about there's 7 innate tools inside of us that we can leverage to get beyond there. These are things just like creativity as an example. But my punchline is that it's the world will have you be one way, and it's your responsibility to be unapologetically, authentically you. And that is a difficult job. I feel like I have, through my own experiences and the experiences of my close friends and more than 1,000 podcast interviews around this topic, I feel like I have cracked the code in a way that I can lay it out and help give people essentially a roadmap for how to do this on their own.
How to be authentically them, and as a result of that, how not to play it safe.
Yes.
And so 2 things. I want to move to the second section, the middle section of the framework that you so lovingly jabbed at, which I freaking love.
Love a framework.
But 2 things. A lot of people don't necessarily identify as being a creative. And so for the context of this section, I want us to identify how you classify creativity. And it's not just with a camera or paint or penning a poem. And then secondly, I want to talk about how you applied your version of creativity as you've built multiple businesses. And that's really where I want to spend a lot of this conversation is let's go into the business building. Let's go into the creative aspect, and then intertwine if possible, because I'm a very needy podcast host.
I'll take it all. Bring it on.
How were you authentically you in each iteration? All of the businesses looked so different.
Yep. Okay. I do want to put a bow on the Creative Life chapter, because my hope is that what you experienced when you went from, again, showing the process, being authentically you, these are the pictures that I took, the world sort of jumped on your back not dissimilar to the second grade me. Miss Kelly jumped on my back, and
The internet is full of Miss Kellys.
Totally, Miss Kelly. And yet it was the process of playing through that when you showed your final images that the world was completely blown away, and you broke the internet, because everyone had also, the people who stayed around to watch the next day were like, wait a minute, I saw all these photographs that were trash. And then you showed up essentially with the butterfly. And to me, that is a very important moment, the playing through of that. And is it reasonable to say that that was bad, neutral, or good for your career? You tell me.
It was freaking fantastic.
Yeah.
It was one of the best things that happened in my career.
But, you've gone on to have an amazing career in all sorts of different, venues since then. And yet I remember just distinctly saying, cool, this is working. And that was an early proof point about exactly the topic that we're talking about. So to me, that we got to put a bow on there, that that was the transformation, and the world watched that, and they were like, "Oh, this is what it." Oh, sorry, I don't know.
No. Okay. You do you, son. This podcast, yeah.
Okay, This is we're watching in real time a person, go beyond their fears. And fast forward to my experience with that I just shared with you with Miss Kelly, and now this next chapter of building businesses and whatever it is that you want to talk about. So it's important we put a bow on there.
Thank you.
Tell me, of the 3 or 4 different...
Are you frameworking my framework?
I'm frameworking your framework.
Bro.
Okay.
I'm here for it. Okay, we didn't come no play. Okay. Let's use it as a linchpin, though, because what we did was you created a platform for thought leaders and creators and a wide variety of people to come in, use the Creative Live platform to show the ugly and then show the transformation. And so many people became so invested in that community, in that learning process. Now, that is so often how a business looks on the outside. Like the business I'm building, the multiple businesses you have built. Sure. Somebody's watching and listening right now, and they're building that beautiful version of the outside. Sure. But let's go back on the inside. Oh yeah. Building this thing that completely exploded on the internet. Yeah. What was the build like?
Crazy town.
Yeah.
I mean, again, just take, for example, your class. The largest class in the history of the world. The New York Times came out and said, I forget who it was. I think Stanford put a class online or something, and it was 130,000 people, and this is the largest. And they were actually corrected. But no, Creative Live is actually, 3 years before you had done something much larger, and it was Jasmine Starr's class. So there was a correction of the record. And that's like when you are blazing sort of that trail, that's both fun, but what goes into creating that on the other side that most people don't see was a lot of confusion, a lot of fear, a lot of experimentation, a lot of things not working. We had a list. The first time we went live, we had a list on the whiteboard the night before at maybe midnight or 1 a.m. before, an 8 a.m., go live. And it was all of this that will break tomorrow. Yeah. And it was a very long list on this whiteboard. And that is the thing that I think I'm most proud of, is the team who assembled. And we just, honestly, it was a couple of employees, some volunteers, like everybody we knew who believed in this idea of making education free and accessible, learning from the world's best entrepreneurs, what it was like for an affordable price. So it was each individual course. And we went from doing one every other month or one a month, essentially, to at our peak, we were doing 70 classes in a month at the same time of that same multi-day. And so we would have Richard Branson in the studio down the hall from Tim Ferriss and Brene Brown over here and Jasmine Starr over here. And it was totally nuts. And the journey from, one class a month and figuring it out to we ended up raising about $60 million in venture capital, having tens of millions of users and making hundreds of millions in revenue. The journey in there was everything that you could imagine. It was essentially a life smashed into a decade.
Can you talk about one of the lowest points as you build?
Oh man, yeah.
Because what happens, and the reason why I do that is not because to put anybody out on blast, but I think that what happens is we see, I read about the funding of 60 million. Sure. JD and I, when you opened, Creative Live had a studio in Seattle. They then opened a second larger, beautiful, stunning studio in San Francisco, which was the former offices of Twitter. Yep. And so when you had the party in San Francisco, JD and I flew up from LA to San Francisco. And I remember being so proud of my friend. And I remember walking through the halls, and I remember thinking, you were an expander in my life. You were showing me that there was a different world of playing that game. And I think that is what a lot of people saw. And so we see the glamour, we see
Sure.
the New York Times corrections. We see
Yep.
this build out. We see the sale. But what was the low point that you actually had to rise up again?
There was a low point every, I would say, 12 to 18 months. They got really hard. The first one was the battle. What a lot of people don't know is we were offered never work again money to acquire the company before we even took funding. So I don't even think I've told you this. And, someone's just dangling a check in front of you that would, not quite private jet money, but pretty close. And the business is 18 months old. And it's not pretty. I actually, myself and my partner, I would say we are, more the artist, the visionary, like, here's a great idea. So we had to bring somebody in to essentially put it on rails. And I said, if we can get this thing on rails, I think we've got something. And sure enough, in 6 months, John brought it in and put it on rails, and we had a tiger by the tail. And then it was an immediate low point of what do we do with this thing that we've got? And each of us had something, had a different desire, from why don't we just, sell this thing and have never work again money after 18 months of work. Another was, let's build this thing. If someone's willing to pay us stupid money 18 months in, imagine what it could be if we ran and built this thing for a number of years, despite the risks. Okay, there's risks involved when you continue operating. And someone else just like, cool, let's just have our thing. Like, this is a cool thing. It's spinning off stupid cash, crazy profitable, crazy margins, because you're selling as, a no incremental cost digital good, which at the time, like the concept of subscription services, zero cost digital goods, these were brand new topics. And my favorite thing about it, in that part where we were super indecisive and very scared, was that when you have someone who is looking at the thing that you're looking at, and the best venture capital firms in the whole world, top 3, are fighting over being able to invest in you. That is the thing that's a glimmer in the hope. So in the middle of when you're all fighting about what to do, and there is something like, there is both a validation and people in the internet saying, this is not going to work, it's stupid. And I feel like one is, we ultimately turned inside and we realized this is an inside game, not an outside game. So what is it that we want? And our goal was impact. And we were realizing that if we could have 100,000 people watch every class, imagine if we did 100 classes. So you start to think about, your goals in terms of impact. So that we took an initial Series A and we started growing very quickly. And as soon as you're on the other side of that, you realize that there's all these trappings when you bring in venture capital. They're not there to give money away. They're there to grow your business as fast as they can. And the heartbreak that is entwined here, which I don't do, I talked a little bit about in the book, is that the goal, the sole purpose, there are investors and then there are venture capital. Venture capital is a specific kind of investment. And the goal of that kind of investment is to take, you need to get to $1 billion valuation or you're a loser. So if you have a business, and I recount this heartbreaking moment in the book where we were doing 36 million ARR, which is basically annual recurring revenue. And on that run rate, we were growing 40% year over year. And I'm thinking, cool, we're going to go in and raise another pile of dough. We'd already been valued at north of 150 million. And great, we're going to go raise another pile of dough and we're going to just go to the moon. And the investor looked me in the eyes across the table just after a great board meeting and said, it's just not that interesting. And to have put all of your time and energy and all of your heart and soul and to be building something that you felt like was transforming the world. And, we're at the TechCrunch Startup of the Year Awards, in the New York Times. I'm literally going all over the country, being on news segments in Silicon Valley and in New York and CNN. And then to have an investor who's, on the Midas list of the top investors of all time, just say, 36 million run rate, growing 40% year over year is just not that interesting. It was just mind-blowing to have that be a failure, because remember, a venture capital, their goal is $1 billion or zero, and they would rather drive you into the ground by trying to get there than have you toil in just being valued at a couple $100 million. And that was a huge wake-up call for me. And that was when I realized, okay, we have to reestablish what our goals are, respect to the investors. We have to just chart a new course. So that, there again, every few years, whether it was deciding to sell the company or raise money and grow. When you raise money, all of the pitfalls that come into growing. I always said I was going to be the person who knew every person in the company. I never wanted to be at distance. And then when you go from 10 employees to 100 employees in a year, you literally can't meet everyone fast enough. And so I became the person, and that was a horrifying experience to me, to have, the values of the company getting morphed because the person who was hired 2 weeks ago just hired another person. And how can they possibly
Right, culture.
How can you embed the culture and the values of the company and the founders and the ethos when you're growing that fast? So it was a series of ups and downs, that last moment with the investor that I shared. And then, of course, when you go into the decision that it's time for the company to be acquired, and this was during the pandemic, all sorts of heartache there, because you want your investors to do better than everyone's doing, and it looks great on the outside, and there's always ugly things on the inside. And do you decide to take a deal that is really good for the investors or good for the people who are building the company? And those are sometimes at odds. Investors have different points of view. One investor is at one certain arc in their fund, and the other is at a different one. And it's all great when everybody's getting along until they're at different,
desires.
Different desires in their arc. So I think the bottom dollar here is that growing anything that looks great from the outside. And even the media headlines are great. The inside action is super, super hard. And as much as I want to tell those stories, just like we told yours from day 4 to day 3 to day 5.
That's right.
I wanted to do that on the internet with Creative Live, and it's very, very difficult when you have the best investors in the world, and we're essentially ahead of the curve on telling stories like this, and not everyone believes that as a benefit. It seems like a drawback. My personal role in the company changed. I went from being able to be the basically founder, chairman, to having to come back and actually take over the CEO role. So I'm an artist operating as a venture capital CEO, which is not my natural state. So all of those things were super, super hard. And yet it was in the times where I was willing to do exactly what you did, is get off the bathroom floor, that I found essentially growth and connection and salvation and the beautiful aspects of any journey.
I saw you change so much in the years where you stepped in as CEO.
Yeah, it was a lot.
What are like maybe 2 main takeaways? Because so you started it as visionary co-founder and you built it, and then
Totally.
the machine completely took off, and you aptly, correctly, beautifully brought in a CEO to keep you in your place of power of visionary and creative.
Yep.
Then you come back as the CEO and you've completely changed.
Yeah.
What are a couple things that people can take away? Like, they're listening and they're probably in a spot that they're doing something that doesn't necessarily feel so natural for them, but they're like, I'm in it to win, and this is what I have to do. I'm asking for myself. Thank you so much.
What would you do for Luna?
What would I do? Anything.
Exactly.
That's right, son. That's right.
And so,
that's right.
And so that's, when, for better or worse, a large part of my identity was wrapped up into helping other people get beyond their fears and, learn new skills that they weren't able to learn anywhere on the internet just a couple years earlier. And so you ask, like, what would you be willing to do to help keep that dream alive?
Anything.
Yeah. And so that was hard. It was really hard. And that required a bunch of unnatural behaviors. And in the book, I think it's really important that, never play it safe, is this realization that all the best stuff in life is on the other side of our comfort zone. And I want to be clear that lots of times I have been unwilling to do that, or I've gone kicking and screaming. And so this isn't about not making mistakes. It's about actually living boldly, being willing to make mistakes and trusting yourself enough to realize that you will right the ship. It's not about avoiding mistakes. It's about recovering as quickly as possible. And so there were lots of times where I betrayed myself. And I cite that in the book as one of them, where I actually decided to become the CEO because we had gone, 2 years down a road with a different CEO that did an okay job. But to his credit, he volunteered and said, look, I didn't know what I was getting into, and this is a different animal than I thought. And so our goal, when, you've blown through at that point, maybe 25 million in venture capital, and you need to re-up, you're like, okay, I can go try and hire someone else, explain the vision to them, help them, learn from them and help them see where we're going, and run the risk of doing the same thing again and being further behind and having to, raise more money and whatnot. Or, I can step in. And there was enough of a lag time in there where I was just like, all right, put me in coach. And that was a very unnatural thing. And I talked about in the book about that actually being a betrayal of myself. And this is the contradiction that we're faced with so often, because you just asked me what would I do, and I said I'd do anything. And then I'm also simultaneously revealing that was a betrayal of who I really was, because was I a venture-backed, CEO? It's like, no. Did I have the ability and the willingness, the drive to learn those skills and to become good at it? Yes. And I also felt like that was something that I needed to realize on the the backside of the acquisition. It was like, would I do that again? And the answer is no, because it was ultimately a slight betrayal of who I was and who I wanted to be. And I thought that that's the fixer part of me that wants to make everything as good as possible. Comes from a great place, but ultimately it was a tiny betrayal. And yet, the outcome is one where we can look back and I can say comfortably now that that is a mistake that I made that I have recovered from. However gracefully or ungracefully is up to someone else to judge, but it doesn't matter to me. The point is that we've played through it and we're on the other side of it and we're stronger because of it. This is my day 5 of the Jasmine Star wedding.
Yeah.
Showing my pictures and like, wow, you built something that again made hundreds of millions in revenue and served tens of millions of people from 170 countries.
More than anything, before we move into like the third part is, I think that by you sharing so generously of your story, there are people watching and listening, but there's also just me sitting across the chair from you saying, I feel like probably I'm at the precipice or the brink of a lot of different opportunities where I could come in and be like, okay, just plainly speaking, it's a great lucrative money opportunity.
Sure.
And then I know the cost of that. And I think that I can do this for now because I think that I can move this here, move that there, save this up. And like, I felt myself doing that. In fact, talking with JD here in Austin driving, and I was just like, listen, I know they're going to come back. And I didn't put a price tag that I wanted to negotiate. I wanted to say it's this or it's nothing, because that's how we genuinely feel about it. And he's like, in any business negotiation, nobody's going to take it at face value because they came at you as one thing and you came back. He's like, this is how it is. I said, but what if that's not the game I want to play? What if it's like, this is it? And he's like, well, that's not necessarily the way that most companies, especially companies of this size, want to play with you.
Yeah.
And I think that hearing your story right now has so solidified, I am not doing it.
There you go.
Because, and I have a whole litany of reasons, but I'm not doing it if not on these circumstances and in this way. And I think that putting up those barriers and saying, this is who I am and I'm going to protect that. I just want to say thank you. Oh, look at this. Like here we are like 14 and a half years later and you're still teaching me how not to play it safe. And so I think that let's talk about the book. And I don't know how open you are about the journey, but like we hugged, we danced. I think maybe JD caught us on video dancing a little when we saw each other.
That's right.
I'll show you my moves.
Okay.
I'll give you a little of like the Puerto Rican rhythm.
That's right. I'll take it.
I'll show you the hip shake. No, but can we talk about the process of the book?
Of course, yeah.
Like, how open are you with that?
I'm wide open. I wrote about it in the acknowledgments, which it's not often that you direct people to the acknowledgments at the last page of the book after you've just read this. But the title of the book, transparently, I had been working on the book for about 18 months, 13 months of hardcore writing, 6 months of research and tinkering, and bless my agent and publisher. They are just both amazing and supported me, and I had basically a plan and a team helping me execute this plan.
Okay, let's pause.
Sure.
I just want to note here, you had a team and you had a plan and you had an idea and you were doing the work.
Yep, doing the work.
I just want to lay out the facts.
Okay, great. These are the facts. And 13 months into really active writing, and about 8 weeks, just shy of 8 weeks prior to the first version of the manuscript being contractually due, I threw it all in the trash and started over. And
so 8 weeks before it's due.
Yeah.
What did you?
There was 55,000 words, and the book ended up being about 65,000 words, and I kept about 5,000 of the original words.
So then, okay, but what about it? Like, how do we hone this skill of looking at something, and even if, because you're deeply creative and you're very soulful at looking at a piece of work.
Yeah.
Is it a knowing? You look at something?
Yeah, to me, this is actually the blueprint of the book. This is the reason that the book came out as it is the book guides you through 7 levers that we all have inside us, 7 tools that are gifts at birth that we need to hone. Just like creativity is trained out of us, we have these 7 tools within us, and it is the honing of these 7 tools, these reorienting, these going back to who we really are, that allow us to make these sorts of decisions. And there's a handful of them. One is the ability to direct your attention. So it sounds very, this is what at the core meditation or mindfulness or awareness practice or prayer, or any of these things are. It's the ability to direct your attention. What you
That's
pay
chapter
attention.
1, son.
It is. What you pay attention to expands.
Right.
And by contrast, to avoid distractions, whether it's our phone or the news or anything else, like the ability to pay attention. We're trained in this life to get attention. And we look at a baby. If a baby doesn't get held when it's born, it dies. There are so many things that the world trains us to seek attention. Just think about the characterization of the internet right now and being an influencer and all of the things. It's about getting attention. And the irony, the twist is that it's not about getting attention, it's about paying it. And what you pay attention to really, really matters.
Okay, I want to pause.
Sure.
There was 2 main things. What we pay attention to expands.
Yes.
What we pay attention to expands.
Yep.
What we pay attention to expands.
Yeah.
When we focus and when we pay attention to abundance, it expands. And when we pay attention to lack, want, and desire, that also expands.
Yeah.
And in the economy, in the social economy of what it is to get attention. And in a way that still builds true as you are,
Sure.
Building
Here
a
we are,
business.
right,
That's right.
yeah.
Here we are.
Right.
What are we doing? We're getting attention. But prior to us getting attention, we had to pay attention.
Yes.
And the greater you pay attention to something, the easier it becomes to get attention because it feels so authentic to who you are.
That's exactly right. And it's through directing attention that we get it. Because if you are building something, doing something extraordinary, standing out instead of fitting in, others can more easily direct their attention to you because you stand out. And so the goal is, again, we're social animals. So the goal is to stay connected and be ourselves at the same time, which is that's the balance. But attention being a key tool that I used in this process of, returning to myself time and time again after all these sometimes small, sometimes massive betrayals. Like I thought I was going to be a professional soccer player and went all the way down that path, only realized that I didn't want to. I did the same thing with medical school, $100,000 in student debt. Only did that because the world was telling me that it would be good if you were a doctor. And I knew from the very first day I started in that direction that wasn't for me. And yet I did it anyway. So there's all these tiny betrayals, and how we direct our attention matters. People can sense and feel that. There are other levels, like the ability to pay attention to your intuition. Intuition is the strongest, the most powerful force in the human, experience that we know the least about, but we know it matters. That our intuition it takes into account our rational mind, but there's something more. The memories in the cells, there's science, there's metaphysics, there's quantum physics. There's a lot of evidence that illustrates that intuition is insanely powerful. So there are, to your point of how do we do this, there are a handful of these levers, like the two I just mentioned, that we can master. And it's in mastering these tools that are native inside us that we become stronger at doing this stuff. So there you got it.
You and I often talk about the muscle that you built. And since I've known you, you've built literal muscle. I see you on your stories. I see those weights. I see y'all stacking them. I was like, dang, he's having a glow up. But also at the same time, it is building the muscle of resilience.
Yep.
And it's building the muscle of getting off the bathroom floor. And so somebody's listening right now and they're on the bathroom floor. What are you telling them?
First of all, keep going. And I like to prescribe action over intellect.
Action over intellect, that deserves a repeat.
The belief is that we can solve our problems from the couch or from the bathroom floor.
Or from our head.
Yeah.
Yeah, no.
And the metaphorical couch or the metaphorical bathroom floor or just being in our brain. And the reality is that it's through taking action that we learn and also learn how to adapt. So that's a really, really important one. And, habits are practices. Those define us. If, what are you if you're not your day-to-day actions? And we think that there's a gap, between our intention and what we believe in our mind, and yet the world can't experience that without any action. So to me, that is the number one message, is that you can't solve it from the couch or the bathroom floor or the back corner of your mind. It requires action and doing the thing. If you want to be the noun, ironically, all you have to do is do the verb. Like if you want to be a writer, then write.
Oh my gosh, is that a Pinterest quote or is that really something you just wrote in your book? Because that's good.
That's in the book. Yeah.
Dang, man, we need to be like, hashtag, we need quotes, we need Pinterest graphics of this stuff.
Sure.
That was good.
But
in order to be the noun, you gotta
do the verb.
Do the verb.
You want to be a leader, lead. You want to be a painter, paint. This is required. You don't get to be the thing without doing the thing. And, there's just so much simple wisdom in there. Ryan Holiday is a friend, I think maybe a mutual friend. You met him maybe via Creative Live at some point. He's here in Austin as well. And I just saw something he shared recently that was about, it's like, this is one of the cornerstones of Stoicism. One of the things that I write about in this book is that you cannot control how the world responds. The only thing you can control, in fact, is how you respond, what your actions are. And Andy Warhol talks about this with making art. When you're making art, don't stop to judge your art. Let the world judge your art. You just keep making. And so this process of getting up over and over and over again and doing the thing that we were meant to do and being able to understand and ferret out all the world's desires for you and to discover your own, that's the most important thing. That's the reason we're here. So to me, these are if I was asked to prescribe something, first of all, it'd be, I put my entire life's body of knowledge into the book. And again, the wisdom of more than 1,000 guests in the show. And many of these are my very, very close personal friends that have had incredible outcomes. Some of these people are people you would know, household names, and others are people you've never heard of. So one, check out the book. Two, realize that you have to take action, and you can't solve these problems from the back corner of your head or the bathroom floor. I'm going to use the bathroom floor from this point out in the book. It's going to be there. And yeah, that the answers are not out there. This is an inside game. And a lot of us, we're conditioned to look, outside of ourselves for all of the solutions to our problems. And that's the beautiful thing about being a human being, is that we're designed to figure this stuff out. Every once in a while we lose our way, but the goal is not to not get lost. The goal is to get good at getting lost and feel comfortable in that moment, and know that you can return time and time again to ourselves just 1%, kinder, 1% stronger, 1% more brave. That's to me where the best stuff is.
Make me a little teary-eyed. I see you in front of me, and I see a friend, and I see somebody who's just flexed that muscle again and again. Thank you for teaching me that muscle. But thank you for writing this book.
I'm happy
Thank
to
you.
do it.
I'm so happy that the world gets to have a piece of you the way that I have had a piece of you over the years. You and your beautiful, amazing wife, partner.
Yeah.
I mean, I can't even say that. I
know.
can't say that Kate is
She's
just
got a
your
lot of
wife.
roles.
She
edited the book
she's
also.
Just like, Kate is just like pure magic. And the
Yeah.
fact that the world gets to have a piece of you, and by proxy, a piece of her too.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Of course. Thank you so
you.
much. It's been such a treat for y'all out there listening in Jasmine Star Land. To watch this woman just do incredible things, reinvent yourself time and time again.
Thank you, friend.
To be in service of others from day one. And I think it's not at all a stretch to say that you have lived the mantra of the book, even just with this moment, this decisive moment, just, 120 seconds ago, we were talking about, I think I just got some clarity there.
Yeah. Thank you.
You have done that over and over again.
Thank
So
you.
you're an inspiration to so many. Congrats on the show and
you.
everything you've been building. It's really, really fun.
Truly, I love and adore you. If you would like more information, Chase, where do people go to connect with you?
I'm just at chasejarvis.com, and the book is at neverplayitsafe.com or chasejarvis.com/book.
Beautiful. And if you want to support small booksellers, we are huge believers in endorsements, but if it's easier for you to find it on any digital retailer, Target, Barnes & Noble, Amazon, all the goods.
Any and all of them, they're
That's
out
good.
there. And pre-orders really help if you can buy the book. I appreciate it.
Let's go. Thank you for watching and listening to The Jasmine Star Show.